Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and welcome to my tutorial on Python plumbing and how to do basic coding in Python using the PyCharm Professional IDE. Uh, and this is for use in my Python courses, typically before we begin our coding assignments. So we're using PyCharm Professional, which you should already have installed. So I'm going to crank that up, and it started on my other monitor. And here's what it looks like right here. Okay, and we want to create a new project. So we're going to click on the option for that. And we want a Python project. So we're going to pick pure Python. And we don't want it to be untitled. So let's give it a title. And we're going to call this, let's call it plumbing underscore demo. Okay. And we'll click on create. And it looks like everything's fine. Okay. So that's our plumbing demo project. And we want to create our first Python program. So let's go up over here in this navigation panel and right click on the name of the project. Say we want a new Python file. So what are we going to call this? We're just going to call this plumbing. Okay, that's it. Now, Python files have the file extension .py. Do we have to type the .py into this name box? No, we don't. Okay. And that's because we have another box that specifies the kind, which is implicitly the way we choose the file extension. So let's do that. Click on OK. And it creates over here, you can see in the project navigation panel, you can see we have a new Python file. It has the icon in front of it that says it's a proper Python file. And it's opened up in the editor, and you can see that that is completely empty. And what we're going to do in our course is we're going to start every program with two comments. Okay. The first one is just going to have the name of the file. So in this case, it's plumbing.py. Okay. And we're seeing some red underlining that shows that we have an error. And that's because it's trying to understand that as Python code, and we intend it as a comment. So there's a really simple way to toggle either one line or a group of lines into comments. And what you do is when you want to do it for one line, you just have to click on the line somewhere, like we are now, we're at the end of the line. And if you're on the Mac like I am, you can command slash. Okay, if you're on Windows, it would be control slash. And this is a way to toggle a line that's into a comment, that's out of a comment, that's back into a comment. Okay. So let's take that out of a comment for now. And we can see the second thing that we usually do is we usually have a comment that gives, that expresses the intention of the program. Okay, so the intention here is demonstrate basic coding conventions for Python. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Now, how do you toggle multiple lines into a comment? Well, you highlight the block, and then again on a Mac, you would key in command slash, and on Windows you would key in control slash. Okay, so what do I mean by plumbing? Well, I mean, how are things hooked together? What are the basic kind of operations we have here? So the simplest thing you can do with the program, oh, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make the type a little bigger so you can see it. I should have done that a little bit earlier. I apologize for that. Okay, yeah, let's do that. Okay. The simplest thing that you can do in a Python program is to print some output on the console. So let's do that. Let's say we print with the command print, and then in the parentheses, print is a function, so it gets arguments. And we're going to give it one argument, character string, that's going to say, let's say, hi mom. This is my classic homage to my late mother. Okay. Okay, so we're doing a couple of things here. One is we have a print. We're going to see how a print works. So we're going to kind of understand that part of Python. It's usually the first thing you learn. Two is we have a statement. We have a basic Python statement that's out in the Python file, and it's not inside of any program structure at all. It's in a state that I call in the clear. Okay, it's nakedly out there. Okay. And the rule is, even though we don't take advantage of it when you finally learn our coding conventions, even though we don't put a lot of lines out here in the Python file, in the clear, and not inside of some other kind of program structure, the rule is that it just runs it. Okay? So if we run this Python file or Python program, I should just expect print a hi mom to work. So let's take a look at that. The easiest way to get something to run, I think, when you're in the editor is just to right click in the editor and then come down and see where it says run plumbing. So we ran that, and again, I'll make that type a little bigger down there. And you'd see we got the output, hi mom. Okay, that's pretty good. Now, you will notice that I've used single quotes or apostrophes to enclose the character string, hi mom. Uh, uh, I'm trying to think of what our two textbooks do. As I recall, the Zell book uses double quotes, and the other book, the Severance book, uses some of both in different situations. Even though Zell is inclined to use the double quotes, most Pythonistas, most in the know Python people prefer the apostrophes or the single quotes. So that's what I've taken to using. And certainly using the double ones is not wrong, but we're going to use singles at this point. Okay, so what happens if you have one line of code? Well, it executes, and the first thing you learn is how to print. Okay, well, let's print a bunch of lines. Okay, so instead of hi mom, let's print line 1. Okay, that's our first line. So let's, in PyCharm, you basically just have to click off of the line in which you made the change in order for it to save the change. You can force a save by, on the Mac, it's Command S. That forces a save. On Windows, it's Control S. That forces a save as well. Once you really get confidence that when you come off of a line, it gets saved, you probably won't be doing a lot of that Command S, Control S. So so we could, if we wanted to, we could come over here and we could right click in the middle of the editor and say run plumbing. But guess what? Once you do that the first time and it opens a console, a Python console for your program, well then it has its own little run button. So you can change the program up here, make sure that you come off of the line that you changed or you added so that it gets saved, and then come down to the bottom and click on the green triangle play button. And it says rerun plumbing. And as you can see, we got line 1. Okay. Well, what if we wanted to print a bunch of lines? What if we wanted to do a lot of things and we wanted to do it kind of in the clear like this? Well, what I usually do is I copy paste, and what I do is I create 8 lines. So by copying and pasting, now I've gone, you continue to double it. So now I've gotten up to 4, then I copy and I paste that. And they all say line 1 now, so why don't we change the numbers? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And let's give that a run. And what I'm expecting to see is just line 1, line 2, line 3, all the way to line 8. So let's see if we get that. So let's do a rerun here. And that's what we got. Again, I can make the type a little bigger, but you can see that. I pause right here. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. All right. So, okay. So we put 8 lines of code, and we put them in the Python file in the clear. They're not inside of any other kind of programming construct, and it executes them one after the other in sequence. It does it one time. It gets to the end. It stops. Okay, that's good. What if we add some blank lines? What if we added, what if we put them into 4 groups of 2? Okay, would a blank line in the source code here, would that cause a blank line to appear in the output? And I'm going to give you a hint, I don't think so. Okay, so we came off of that, we're going to run it, and look, 1 through 8. So blank lines in Python source code, typically if we want to add a blank line for emphasis, sort of editorial emphasis, well, we can add typically in one bunch of code, we add a single blank line to add some emphasis. But it doesn't create any action at all in the execution of the program. It just makes the program perhaps easier to read. Okay. All right. So what would happen if we had some code that was in another programming construct? Okay, because I said if these lines are out here in the clear all by themselves and not in another programming construct, well, they're just going to execute. Well, what kind of programming construct am I thinking of? Well, I'm thinking of the function. So we can define a function. We say def and then the function name. So let's call it some function. Okay. And you can pass arguments or parameters to functions, so they have parentheses to hold them, although this one isn't going to get any arguments, so it's going to have empty parens. And then it gets a colon, and the colon says, this is the header for the function, some function, and look inside to see the code. Okay, so let's just print inside, print hi mom. Okay, and we did that. Okay, so how do we know this code is in the function? Well, it's indented. Okay, the combination of the fact that we have a colon after the function header, that gives us a hint that there's going to be contents. And how do you know that something is contained in something else in Python? Well, it's indented. And typically it's indented 4 spaces. And in PyCharm, it's typically set by default to give you 4 spaces when you hit the tab key. Okay. Now, we don't want tabs, and there's a reason for that, but PyCharm usually takes care of replacing a tab with 4 spaces, and we're fine. Now, you already see that we have a light gray underline, at least I hope you can see. We have a light gray underline under some of these things, and this is, it says a PEP 8 expected 2 blank lines found 1. So a PEP 8 is the style guide for Python. And it turns out that PyCharm automatically enforces the style guide, and it warns you when you are not following the style guide. And it said it wanted 2 blank lines. So it turns out that these functions should be separated from other code by 2 blank lines, not just 1. So 1 blank line is just kind of editorial license. 2 blank lines is the way we set off. You can see I still have an error here. The way we set off a function. And why do they do that? Well, they just think that's a good way to make functions stand out and not have them look like they're part of the other code. So what happens to code that's inside of a function? Well, it's kind of hidden, okay? Because when we have a function header like def some function, it says to the Python interpreter, remember this code. It doesn't say run this code, okay? We have to actually officially say run this code in order to get it to run. So if that's true, we've got these 8 lines out here in the clear. They're not inside any kind of a function. A function is a very oft used programming structure. Okay, so we say if lines are not inside of a function, they just run. Okay, but if you have code inside of a function, you're not saying to run it. You're just saying, remember that when I do call the function, I'll want to run the code, but you're not saying to run it yet. And we don't have any code here that says run some function. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to test it again, and I'm going to expect to get the same old 1 through 8 lines, but I'm not going to expect to see hi mom. So let's give it a test. We'll come down here and we'll run. And there we go. Just what I said. Okay. What happened to hi mom? Well, it's like a game of Simon Says. You know, Simon didn't say to run the hi mom, so it doesn't run. Nobody said to run some function. Well, how would you run some function? Okay. Well, you just use the function name all by itself. So you can say some function paren. Okay. Oh, and interestingly, it doesn't like that because I need to skip 2 lines before I need to have 2 blank lines surrounding a function. Okay, so now that I've officially said that I want to run some function, okay, it's going to run. Okay, I'd expect it to run 1 time. So I'm going to expect line 1 through line 4. Then I'm going to expect hi mom, and then I'm going to expect to see line 5 through line 8. Let's run a test and see if that's what we got. Okay, and that is what we got. Now, I'm going to do a trick here with PyCharm. If you come to this lower window panel and you double click on the part that doesn't have a tab in it, if you double click, it'll go to a full screen mode. So I put that to full screen mode. I'm going to make the type a little bigger. And you can see we got just what we expected. Lines 1 through 4, hi mom, lines 5 through 8. Very good. So I'm going to double click again, just in that blank area to the right of plumbing. And it's going to go back to it where it belongs in the layout. Okay, so that's pretty good. So now, can I put what if I wanted to run this sum function twice? Well, I could. Let's run it 2 times in a row between 4 and 5. And let's actually run it a 3rd time after 8. Okay, so I'm going to expect hi mom to be 3 times, twice after line 4 and once after line 8. So let's give that a run. And I'm going to double click to make that big again. And look at this. And there we are. Hi mom. So every time we have a call to the function or we invoke the function, it runs. And it runs the code that's inside the function. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, so now can we put these calls to some function, or invocations as they're called, they're function calls, can we put them just anywhere? Turns out not. Okay, what if I wanted to add one? I'm going to copy paste. I'm going to copy this. What if I wanted to add one between lines 2 and 3? Would that work? Well, as you've seen, as I pasted that in, I got the red squiggly line, and the red squiggly line is a proper error. It's not just a warning that we've violated the style guide. This is code that won't properly run. And why not? Well, it can't see some function. And why not? Well, because these lines that are out in the clear, they can only see functions that were defined before them. Okay, both the definition for some function and this invocation on line 7 are both at the top level in the Python file, and this invocation can't see some function because it came after it. It has to do with the nature of Python as an interpreted programming language, and it's just kind of inconvenient. Okay, so if we want to have an invocation to some function, well, and we want to have these lines out in the clear, well, they all have to come after the definition for some function. Well, that seems kind of messy. So let's try to use the conventions that Zell uses in chapter 1, in that he doesn't have code, or very much code, in the clear. Okay, it's good practice to put all your code into functions and only have one line or maybe two or three in the clear. Well, how could we do that? Well, first of all, let's get rid of this sum function stuff. Okay. And um, let's start to use the coding conventions that Zell uses in Chapter 1 and that we're going to follow because they're good professional programmer conventions. Professional programmer conventions say the following. They say that we don't uh, have all code is in some function or other, okay, except an invocation to that function. So what does that look like? Well, it's better to see it than to talk about it. But we start off with a definition of the function called main. That's the convention for the top level function. So we say def main, okay, and then it doesn't like those lines because they're not in the function. We have an empty function. So I'm going to cut these and I'm going to paste them right here. Oh, that's good. So why don't we cut these and we're going to paste these right here. I didn't like those. So I'm going to highlight that and hit the tab key. And when I do that, I move over everything that I've highlighted, one indent. Okay. And again, I do that by pressing the tab key. The PyCharm editor is pretty smart. When I press the tab key, it inserts 4 spaces for me. So I'm going to take this and let's see what we can do here. That went there. And let's choose this. Let's cut that one. And this. That one's there. Okay, so we got that. We've got too many blank lines at the end. We usually should just have one blank line at the end. Okay, and we've got 2 blank lines before. Well, maybe 2 blank lines after. Okay, that's fine. Okay, now ask yourself, what's going to happen when we run this? Okay, well, I'm going to predict that we're not going to get any output at all because we have a definition for main which says remember this code, but we don't have anything that says run this code. So let's click off the line to make sure everything's been saved, and let's rerun plumbing, and we get no output at all. And that's because we never said to run it. Well, how could we say to run it? Well, we have an invocation of main. So just out here in the clear, one line, the last line in the program, it just says main paren paren. It's a call to the main function. Okay, and main likes to have a blank line. That likes to have one blank line after it, stylistically. Okay, that's why we're getting the gray underline. Okay, now I predict, and I'm hoping that you're predicting, that when we run this, we're going to get the output that we saw for a long time, line 1 through line 8, just one right after the other. Let's see if that works. So we're going to come down here, and we're going to run it, and there it is, line 1 through line 8. Well, pretty cool. Now, is main a magical name? Okay, it's some kind of a magical name for a function that that gets some unique treatment by the Python language. It turns out it's not. Okay, it's a name that we choose by convention to be our top level function. And I'll show you in a minute what I mean by top level. Okay, so could it be, uh, again, if we run this, we get all the lines. What if it had a different name? Okay, let's test that, just just for grins. Can we change the name of a function easily? Well, we can change the name of almost anything easily with a capability that PyCharm has. And a lot of other these kind of products are called IDE, Integrated Development Environment. They have these refactoring functions. So what's refactoring? Refactoring is when we change the code to make it typically more readable or maintainable without changing the functionality. And one of the first things that people do in order to do that is sometimes they feel the code is more readable when the names are different. So how would you rename a function? Well, you would highlight it and then you would right click and choose refactor, rename, and it says rename function main and its usages to, and let's just call it Waldo, some arbitrary silly name. So we click on refactor. Okay, sometimes when you refactor, you get all the changes automatically. Sometimes you get a question down here. It'll show you a preview, and then you have to tell it do the refactor. That's what we want. And so what it did is it changed the name of the function to Waldo, and it changed the function call or invocation to Waldo as well. So will that get the same output? Well, let's figure it out. So we're going to right click and say run plumbing. And there it is. Okay. So there's nothing magical about the name of the function main. It's just an important coding convention. Okay. So everybody uses it. I expect you to use it. But Python isn't looking for it in some kind of a magical way. The reason that main runs is that we have this line down here. So let's practice our refactor rename. So we can we can double click on Waldo to highlight it. Right click, refactor, rename, call it main. So we say that. Now we have to say do refactor. Again, you have to tell it to actually do it. Every time you refactor a program, it means that you're changing it. Oh, typically you're moving code around and you're changing the names of things and you're reformatting it, but you're trying to keep the functionality the same. Okay. So when we did that, we expect to be able to run a test. Again, we're going to right click and say run plumbing. And we're expecting to get the same output. So a successful refactoring of code is typically made when the code looks better. It's easier to read. Okay, the structure of the code is better, and we're getting the same output that we had previously. Okay, now let's think about this. Why is this called main? Okay, well, it's called main because it's the main function. Okay, well, if it's the main function, then there must be other functions. Well, we don't have any yet. Okay, but how could we refactor this program? How could we re-express it? Okay, and use the re-expressing or refactoring tools. How could we do that in order to demonstrate what it would be like to have a program that had more than one function? And here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this 8 lines of code and we're going to put it into 4 functions. Okay. The first one we're going to do by hand. Okay. Okay. So let's let's define a function. We want to skip 2 lines because it's got to be 2 lines blank around the functions. And let's define something we say do part 1. Okay? Paren, um, colon. Okay, that's good. So what code do we want there? Well, we want this line 1, line 2. Okay, so we want to take this and let's do a cut. Sorry, a cut. And let's do a paste down here. Paste. Okay, and that's good. Now, is that going to work the same way? Well, no. Why? Because we don't have a call to part 1. Again, all this definition says is remember this code. Now, we told it to remember the code. We put the right code in there, but we never told it to invoke or call that code. So up here, we just put the name of the function, do part 1. And I'm going to take the auto completion here with a double click. Do part 1. So this is a refactoring, okay? What we've done is we've extracted a function from the main, and now we have a second level function that is called from the main. Okay, so let's go here. Now, if this is a proper refactoring or re-expression of the program, then it ought to pass the same test. So let's take a look at that. We're going to run. There it is. Line 1 through line 8. Now, you would think that this extracting of code from a function might be a thing that you'd want to do a lot. Okay, because what happens? Well, you write your code, it's all one big inline code, and then you realize, I'm not really doing one thing here, I'm doing 4 things here. Now, what are we really doing here? Well, we're really doing one thing here, but let's pretend we're doing 4 things, okay? Because printing 8 lines that are all pretty much the same, well, that looks like pretty much, you could think of it as one thing or you could think of it as 8. Now we're just going to, with some dramatic license here, we're going to think of it as 4 parts that each print 2 lines. Okay, so yeah, you might want to do that a lot. You might see some of your code. In fact, let's not do it 4, okay? Let's turn it into 3 parts. So the first one has 1 and 2. The second one, let's have it do 3, 4, and 5. Now, is there an automatic way to take code that is inline like this and extract it into a function that's being called? Yeah, it turns out that there is. It's called extract method. So we're going to highlight those 3 lines. We're going to right click on it. We're going to say refactor extract method. This isn't a method, this is a function. Well, it turns out that that's just what they call it. In the object-oriented part of Python, functions that are in Python classes, which is not what we do in the first 2/3 of our course, they're called methods. And how are they different? Well, they have some different capabilities, but they look pretty similar to these. So it just turns out that this refactoring feature is called extract method. So we extract it. And it says, oh, what do we want the name to be? Let's call it do part 2. Do part 2. Okay. And do we have to pass it parameters? No, we haven't gotten to parameters yet. We're several weeks away from that. We just say okay. Okay. And what happened? Well, it inserted the code do part 2, and it created the method do part 2. Okay, well this is again extracting a method or a function. This is a typical way to re-express the program to make it more readable, more maintainable. It's a typical refactoring. Okay, so we make the change, and then what do? We test it. So we come down here, we're expecting to get the same output. If when you refactor a program, you don't change the functionality. You make it more readable, you make it more usable, but you don't change its function. Okay, so we're going to run this. And what did we get? Well, we got the right answers. Okay. All right. Now let's just take the last 3 lines and do the same thing. So I'm going to highlight the 3 lines, right click, refactor, extract method. I'm going to call it do part 3. Why? Well, when we just have a bunch of of arbitrary code that we're trying to parcel out, we don't have a good name for what this does, right? So do part 3 is as good of a name as we can come up with. Typically, we would want each of the functions to do just one part of solving the problem. Okay. And so what has happened here? Well, now we've defined a do part 3 that prints lines 6, 7, and 8. So part 1, 1 and 2. Part 2, 3, 4, 5. Part 3, 6, 7, 8. Some people like these to be in a different order, right? They would like part 1 before part 2, before part 3. The way that this PyCharm does refactorings, it does it this way. If you want to change the order, sometimes this order bothers me. You can just, we could do this. We could, well, first of all, let's do a test. And we get the same output. So we refactored successfully. What if we wanted do part 3 to come third? Well, we would just cut it and paste it down here. It needs 2 blank lines before it because it's a function. Okay. And what if we wanted do part 2 to come second? Well, we do the same thing here. Skip a couple of lines. And well, we paste that. Okay. And now they're in the order 1, 2, 3. I like that better. Not everybody does, so do that. And then we only need 2 blank lines between the function main and the function do part 1. So let's get rid of our extra blank lines. And then our gray squiggly goes away because we're following the style guide. Okay. And is this a refactoring? Yeah, this is a refactoring. We didn't use a special feature of the editor to do it. We just use cutting and pasting. But we, maybe you believe, like I do, that having them in the order 1, 2, 3 is more favorable. So you can do that. So you've refactored it, and now you're going to test it. And then you've got that. Okay, so let's just take a look. With any of the windows that we have here, the 2 that are the important ones are the editor window and the Python console window. If we want them to go to full screen, again here we can do with the editor. We can just go to the right of plumbing.py on this kind of gray part and double click. And it goes to full screen. And it's a little bit easier to see it now. Okay, so the minimum program that we put together has a main function, and it ends with a call to main. Okay, and then to the extent that we write programs that are more complex, we're not going to let the main function get too long. We're going to look for parts that we can extract from it. And typically, we're going to look for parts that do some coherent thing that we can give a proper name to, a better name than do part one. Okay. And we'll be learning this as we go. Okay. So these are the conventions that we're going to be following throughout the course. And here's how to make them happen in PyCharm. Okay. So we're not going to write a whole lot of lines in the clear, typically just one. Eventually we get to the point in about 2/3 of the way through the course where we'll we'll have this um, call to main be conditional. So we'll learn about if statements. So we'll say if A is less than B. Now we're going to say if A is equal to B, then we'll have a call to main. Okay, so that's as complex as the code that we ever have here is. Now I didn't define A and B, so that's not going to work too well. So I'm going to undo this code on the Mac. That's a Command Z, and on Windows it's a Control Z. Okay. So this is it. This is the basic structure that we're going to be using. Okay. In the first couple of weeks, most of the code that we're going to be writing will all fit into one function. It'll all fit into main. So we'll have a main that'll have all of our logic in it, and then we'll have the call to main at the end, and that's it. And that's considered good professional Python programming practice. And we're going to begin with these. We're going to begin with these two comments. The one that just has the name of the file, so you can see it if you do a screenshot. And then the second one has a statement of the intention of the program overall. Okay, and then we're going to follow the coding conventions that we talked about. We're also going to try to not break any of the style rules. The biggest one that we have is this. How many blank lines we're allowed to have. Around a function, you ought to have 2 blank lines before it and 2 blank lines after it. Okay? Inside of a function, you can skip 1 line for emphasis. Okay? But if you skip 2, it's going to complain. It's going to say, no, now that's looking like we have another function here. So you can, it says too many blank lines here. So if we get rid of the blank line, it's fine. That squiggly gray line goes away. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to use these conventions. We're going to try to use this conform to the style guidelines. And one of the nice things about PyCharm is it makes it easy to do. We've seen lots of features that make it easy to refactor code. If we get code that doesn't quite conform either to our coding conventions or to the style guideline, we can use these refactoring features in order to get it in the shape that we'd like it to be in. And again, if you've gone full screen with anything and you want to go back to its regular size, you just go in this gray area here and you double click and it remembers where it belongs. And there you are. That's it. So that's how to find your way around a Python program. That's why we use the conventions that we use. That's how things work in a Python program. And that's a bit of history as to how and why to do it. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to say bye until next time. Bye bye.